Hey everyone, welcome to another video on the Blue Abroad YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to go through every player on the list and take a look and grade them and rank them using the tier maker list that has been created by, I don't know who created it, but somebody did. They've put all the players in this list but for Cooper Lord and Rob Monahan. And I want to break down their seasons and rank them. I've done this in the past and ranked them as tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 players. I'm going to do it slightly different. The first tier will be the elite performers of 2024. And my definition is players who delivered standout performances throughout the season. So these are the top players who consistently dominated, leading key stats and playing crucial roles in Carlton's success. Next will be the consistent contributors in 2024. So these are the players who regularly performed well, showing consistency in their roles, but without the same high impact moments as the elite tier. They were reliable week in, week out, and vital to Carlton's overall stability. Then we've got the occasional impact players. So these players had flashes of brilliance, but were inconsistent. They might have had standout games or specific roles, but struggled with consistency or were limited by injury or form throughout the season. Then we've got those who fell short of expectation. So these are players who underperformed compared to those expectations or were hindered by injuries. They have potential, but they didn't have a strong impact in 2024. And then we've got the development players, so players who spent most of the season in the reserves. There's a few outliers here. It's really hard to rate Sam Doherty, Jack Silvani, and I found it really difficult to rate Sam Durden because I don't expect him to play many games as it is, but he's also not a development player. So there's a few inconsistencies and anomalies there, but overall, I had a crack at it and I'm going to show you how I worked through it. I was a bit confused with a few players. Some of them were in between tiers. I felt uncomfortable putting them in one tier, but also felt uncomfortable putting them in the other because some of them had match-winning performances but weren't at their very best. So take a look, and then at the end of the video, once you've watched it, I want you to maybe even do yours. I'll put the link in the description below. Give me some feedback on what you had different, if you had anything different, which you probably will, and we'll chat about it then. Okay, maybe we'll start with the development players who really didn't even get a look in at all. So we know Harry Lemmy was definitely one of those guys. Matt Carroll is definitely one of those guys. Dom McQuay, one of those guys. Although Dom, he's been on the list for a bit of time now. So I'm mindful of, I didn't really expect him to play this year, so it's difficult to say he fell short of expectation. I do wonder when the time will come where that expectation rises for Dom. Hudson O'Keefe was also in a development role. He really didn't play. He missed a lot of football with his hamstring issues. Billy Wilson in this category here, one of the few players I look at the list now and I say has genuine pace and genuine speed. So I'm looking forward to one day unlocking that. Murkov will go here as well. Didn't play, didn't even think he would, well, I wasn't sure if he would even be a part of the list given the health conditions that he had to go through. Let's have a look. Maybe Jackson Binns, probably at the top of this list. He did play a couple of games, but I don't think it would be fair to put him here falling short of expectation or having occasional impact because he only played a couple of games. And I think Ashton would go here as well. He also played a few quarters, as we know, but he didn't really get the opportunity to be classified. I think this will change with probably these three moving forward next year onwards. Would like to see them have a little bit more expectation and showcase what they've got. I think that'll do for this. unless we get back to it. So let's take a look. Well, elite performers. I think Jacob Wiedering goes here. Outstanding year. Had to overcome injury in the preseason and was still able to perform at a really high level, consistent, reliable. Just had a fantastic year, really. Patrick Cripps, clearly, I might put him at the very top of this list. Not much to really convince with this one. In contention for another Brownlow medal. Ultra consistent. I think this was Patrick's most consistent season of his career. I thought he was better this year than in his Brownlow year, but for the goal kicking, kicked 17 goals, which leads all midfielders. Just played at a super high level. I know Nick Newman didn't make the All-Australian squad, but I think he performed at an elite level. Consistency is always a feature of his game. Plays with the right spirit. I mean, those are just effort indicators, and efforts are non-negotiable, but I thought he really elevated his status in the team. I would have liked for him to be recognised externally and make the squad. It wasn't to be, but I think he was an elite performer. Have a look here. Mitch McGovern. Mitch McGovern, I think, was a consistent contributor overall. He obviously was a bit sore at various stages of the year. Played 18 games, which is a good return, given he is a player that has been injury prone over the last few years. So I was pleased to see that he was able to stay on the park more than what he wasn't. And I thought he was a consistent contributor throughout the year. De Koning, I think, is the same. Although I thought De Koning had a patch there where that was elite. But overall, I think he became a consistent contributor. I think he elevated himself and his status. It was really such a shame to see him get injured towards the end. And by the time we got to the final, I realised how much of a point of difference he makes to our midfield game, and those follow-up efforts, and his ability to generate score launches, combine his strength with his athleticism, and he's got that competitiveness about him. Ultimately he plays 18 games, but I thought he became a consistent contributor when he played. Harry. You know what? I think Harry was an elite performer. His goal kicking accuracy improved at a really high rate. And I think I want to reward Harry for that. He was arguably our best forward. The end of the season wasn't great, so I am mindful of that and putting too many players in this elite category. But I think Harry's overall game improved. I think we saw when he played how important he was. I mean, he played 21 games. He averaged, over 2 goals a game, marks the ball around the ground, pinch hits in the ruck. At the very end, he was obviously injured. And so that was a little feature of his season, but he did play the 21 games, and he, did kick quite a few goals compared to last year. He kicked 49. So I thought that was a big improvement. And really just that goal kicking routine, the narrative this time last year was that he'd really lost his routine and his confidence. And so I thought he was an elite performer. Blake Acres, I think, was a consistent contributor throughout the season. He's a very available player. 23 games, only missed the one. And I think consistency is the best way to describe Blake Acres and the way he goes about it. So I thought he was quite good for us. Orazio Fantasia, I thought he had occasional impact. I thought he exceeded expectation from the standpoint of the amount of games that he played. I was pleasantly surprised at how much he was available. He ended up playing 15 games. I don't think he was the difference in many of those games. So I therefore put him as a player that had occasional impact. Doc, well, how do you grade this one? Doc did his ACL. So the expectation was that he would play all year. So he was injured. He only played in opening round and the final. So in terms of what I expected him to play and play at a really high level. Unfortunately, he did his ACL and played. I don't know if maybe I should have another category here. Maybe I should not rank Doc. Maybe I'll leave him towards the end. Jack Carroll, I thought he had the occasional impact. Really in the first month. That's where I saw Jack Carroll seemingly take a step forward and step into this next phase of his career. He played 15 games, but really it was just the first 4 where I thought he had really improved. And then after that, it fell away. I thought his performances fell away. The role changes, a lot of versatility needed. And overall, I can't see how he had anything else other than occasional impact. Brody Kemp. I think Brody had a year where he showed occasional impact. Don't think he was a reliably consistent player. Played 21 games, so that does say something. And I thought there were certain moments throughout the year where he really helped. I mean, think of later in the season where he kicked 4 against the Eagles. That was a crucial game, and we needed that from him. And there were various stages of the year, even in defense, where, he played at a relatively high level. But ultimately, he showed occasional impact. I actually liked his year overall, and I think it's a good one moving forward. I feel like he's going to now elevate into this versatile role, and we'll see that more often than not because we, for the first time, saw him play forward this year. So that's how I saw Brody's season. Sam Walsh was a consistent contributor, maybe a little bit stiff not to be an elite performer. Very high standard that he sets for himself. And I think what must be said about Sam Walsh was his ability to be available, given what had happened with his body in the preseason. And he had a bit of a setback, but he ends up coming in and playing 20 games. And I think that's a really good return, given the context of where his year was at and what it was looking like at the start of the year. So, look, Sam Walsh, I think we're all thinking the same thing. Get a full preseason, uninterrupted, and the sky's the limit. But I thought he was still a very consistent contributor. Towards the end, there was a bit of criticism around his ball use and things like that. But he always shows up. He always finds a way to win a lot of the ball. His tackle numbers were very high. Oh, elite performers. He's close. I might put him at the top of this list or at the end of this list. I'm going to leave him here for now. Corey Durden, I thought we saw only occasional impact at best. Really just once. Maybe it's a fall short of expectation. Now, the story of Durds' year is riddled with, injury and form. Early in the season, it was probably form. Later in the season, once that shoulder happened, it just wasn't working for him. Brave enough to be available and play. But I reckon I went into this season thinking he could play, 15 plus games. He played the 14, so it's not like he didn't play enough games. But I reckon he would feel like he's got so much more to offer this year. And if that shoulder gets right and his body's right, then we'll see what happens. But, he battled soft tissue, shoulder, and then by the end he was hanging on. So I think he fell short. Jesse Motlop, I think, is another one that fell short of expectation. Now, granted, both of these guys are young. Jesse's 20. Jesse had a great preseason, and I was very mindful of being careful not to have too much expectation on Jesse. But I think at the end of the day, once he got into the side, he wasn't really able to get going. He didn't look like himself. And I think this will be the big lesson year for him. I don't know. The pathway of him getting into the side I thought was good. He played quite a few games in the VFL after, having the repeat injuries. Played 7 games, kicked 6 goals. I think ultimately, by the standards that he's set and the standards that I have him at, I think he's got magic. I think he's got, a potential to be a really good player. And I reckon he fell short this year. Elijah, I thought Elijah was a consistent contributor. First season with the club, he was very available. He played 22 games. The ones that he missed were those that he was suspended from. So they were out of our control, per se. So the fact that he was available, big tick, good recruit. Hopefully, the discipline that he showed this year rings true throughout the off season, and he continues it, and it just keeps going with, his career. And if he can have as good a preseason as what he had this year, next year, we could start. I really think he could be an elite performer eventually. So we'll see. Jack Martin definitely fell short of expectation. That was through injury. We just didn't see Jack Martin this year. He played 3 games, and it's a shame. Unfortunately, this is a feature of the story of Jack Martin. The injury piece is always a feature of Jack Martin, and it's just a shame because he's got the ability to be an elite performer. He's got game-winning ability, but this year he just couldn't get going, and the body didn't help him, and a number of factors didn't help him. So that's why I put him there. Marchbank, I think Marchbank was also here. Injury is a big part of his story. We weren't able to see him at all. He played 3 games, senior player. It's a real shame. I feel for all of these guys that get injured and that get repeatedly injured. It would be hard. None of them want to get injured, and Marchie's just had a horrid run of it really for years now. So I think he fell short. Pitto, I think Pitto had the occasional impact. There were various games where it looked good. Halfway through the year, there was still debate as to whether we played 2 rucks or 1. The highlight for me, I think, was that GWS game and what he was able to do. And he had a patch of form where for about 4 or 5 weeks, he was getting 15 plus possessions. He was generating score launches, and it looked really solid. So overall, I think he had occasional impact. He played his role. He might be a consistent contributor, but I think occasional impact fits better. Cunners, he obviously fell short of expectation. The expectation is, you're going to be available. He played 5 games, just couldn't get going. Martin Marchbank have a very similar story when it comes to their bodies letting them down and not being able to withstand the rigors. Some of these injuries, if not most of them, that the 3 of them face are out of their control. I don't know the answer to the question as to what's in your control and what's out of your control, but just didn't see enough of Dave Cunningham, and his body let him down. George Hewitt, I really want to put him in the elite performers category, but I'm going to say he's a consistent contributor. Such a professional, played 22 games, plays at a high level. Consistency and George Hewitt match very well. I think he and Nick Newman have a very similar trait when it comes to their consistency. Yeah, George was great, and he got better as the season went on as well. I think this was a year where we got it right with George, and whatever happened with managing his body, and he's obviously had back issues in his career, but no, he had I thought he had a ripping year. Lewis Young, I think Lewis fell short of expectation. He was able to get into the side at the very end of the season, and I think the way he played in those games was a positive. He ultimately played 9 games, so it's not terrible, but I think it wasn't until those last 2 where I really started seeing him play with that force, with that aggression, and ultimately I expect more from Lewis, because I think Lewis has got more to offer. So I put him there. Jordan Boyd, I think, had occasional impact. Thought his kicking skills were really showcased early in the year. He got injured, and that hurt his season. There were moments of a lack of concentration, but ultimately I thought he had occasional impact, and he had Had an okay year. He wasn't terrible, but I do think he's so important for that ball movement. He's one of the few players that I would say has a reliable kick on him. So I'll put him there. Matt Owies, I think Owies was a consistent contributor. It's his best year of his career, Matt Owies. Availability is a big feature of his game and has been for a while. Ultra professional, played 23 games. The one that he missed was due to suspension. Kicked 33 goals, career high, and a season high for small forwards. Kicked 3 goals on 6 occasions this season and really elevated himself. At the time of filming, he has not been offered a contract, or we have not got news of a contract extension, but I thought he was a consistent contributor nonetheless. Lockie Cowan. Wow, Lockie Cowan. Is this occasional impact or consistent contributor? He definitely elevated. He played a role. No, I'm going to put Lockie Cowan as a consistent contributor, which is a great rap on him. He exceeded expectation, in my view, by some margin. He played a couple of games last year, and then this year he became he was relied on. He played 17 games. He became a relied player and a required player, and he allowed a move like Zach Williams to happen. So no, I thought that was excellent, and I reckon I'll put Ollie there too. I think the two boys did something similar in being available. Ollie Hollands played 23 games, played a role on that wing. The focus of Ollie's role is around his ability to run back in transition, his defensive running, and then his ability to provide an option with the overlap run. And he did that. And then by the end of the season, we started seeing the confidence grow. And I reckon he came through that patch. There was a bit of criticism around his possessions, but I think when you actually look at the role that he was playing, he was consistent in it. So fair play to Ollie, and well done to Lockie as well. Adam Chera fell short of expectation. Obviously, injury was a part of his story, hamstrings, and he just really wasn't able to get going. And, I classify Ches as a guy that really can be in this elite performer category. And so for that reason, he fell short of expectation. We ended up getting 13 games out of him, and that's just not going to cut it. We're not going to get the best out of him playing 13 games, but hopefully with this trip to Qatar, we can get those hamstrings right. Charlie. Look, Charlie won us games. I'm mindful of putting him here because he was patchy with his form in game. However, at the same time, he genuinely won us games off his own boot. He made the All-Australian squad. I can think of 3 or 4 games alone where if he did not play, we do not win, or we're not even a part of the game. I think he and Walshy are similar. So they're either at the very top of the consistent contributor list, or they're in the elite performer list. Oh, this is a difficult one. Somewhere there. So if Charlie's here, why isn't Harry here in consistent contributor? You know what? I'm going to put him here. I'll put him here at the very top of consistent contributors, and I'll work that. Give him something to work with. Alex Cincotta, I think, had the occasional impact. We saw 3 or 4 occasions where his defined role as the tagger for certain midfielders, he did it at a very high level. Butters, I think of. I even like the role he played on Tom Stewart. He worked his way into the season. He wasn't a part of the team at the very beginning, but he played 16 games, and I thought he showed occasional impact. And I thought he ended his season. I think he can be pretty proud of his season as well, the amount of games that he played. Adam Sard, 18 games. Adam Sard is a consistent performer. He plays his role He didn't have his best year. I think we can all agree on that. But he didn't have a poor year. And I think even when Adam Sarr's not at his absolute optimum, he's still impacting relatively. So I'll put him at the consistent contributors list. Cottrell here, occasional impact. He would be here at a consistent contributor had he not gotten injured. I think the first couple of months of the season, he looked like he was ready to take that next step. I mean, he played 14 games, didn't look the same after the injuries took place. So I thought he had occasional impact. Zach Williams, I think he had occasional impact. He had a couple of games where he kicked those goals. He's come back off an ACL. I expect more from Zach. Yeah, I do expect more from Zach. What Zach did well was be available. 19 games. Maybe it's here. Yeah, maybe it's here. Occasional impact. If I go back to the definition, these players had flashes of brilliance but were inconsistent. They might have had standout games or specific roles but struggled with consistency or were limited by injury or form. Okay, that sounds like Zach Williams more than fell short. But I do expect more from Zach. Kennedy, I thought he was a consistent contributor somewhere here. And if you look at the context of his year, playing in a number of different roles, being available to play those roles, and still finding a way to impact, I'll put him there. Fogg is the same. Fogg was the same. When he played, he performed his role, I think, at a really high level. He became a really important player. 15 games, collision injury early in the season, and then a collarbone at the end. Hardly in his control. But I think he should be rewarded and patted on the back. Now, Sam Durden, I mean, he's not a development player. He didn't have occasional impact. So I think fell short of expectation, but I don't really expect him to play much footy at all. So I've got Sam Durden, Jack Silvani, and Doc. Now Jack Silvani didn't play, so it's hard to grade him anywhere here. Doc barely played. He played, 1.5 games. He also did an ACL. I think the fact that he even got back onto the field is a miracle. So I don't really know how to put these three players and where to put them. I think they'll go here because they're not development players. They fell short of expectation, but ultimately, with the context that we have, we know that they were injured. Well, these two in particular, Sam Durden, not as much. It's a bit of a different story. And that's the list. Now, let me just go through everything again. I'm a little bit unsure about Harry and Charlie. They both made the All-Australian squad. So you don't make the All-Australian squad without being an elite performer. But I'm very mindful of rewarding the right people. See, Charlie, I think, can be better. But at the same time, he was consistent. He just didn't have the 5 and 6 goal games as many times as what we've normally seen. Played 21 games. I mean, he kicked 57 goals. That is elite. That is. And he averages nearly 3 goals a game. Okay. Look, they made the squad. Okay, so the top guys made the squad but for Newman, but I think Newman should have made the squad, so that makes sense. These guys were consistent contributors. Few players missing here. Cooper Lord, who played a couple of games. Cooper Lord. Rob Monahan. Matt Duffy, obviously not here, but look, Cooper would be in development. It's hard to really grade him and have any expectation of him at all. And Rob Monahan, the same. So they weren't on this list. I've only just realised it, to be honest. And that's me. So that's my list. Says a bit. We had quite a few underperforming players and clearly quite a few players that weren't able to be available. Availability was part of expectation. You know, there is an expectation that you'll be available. There is an expectation that you're likely to have challenges, whether that's injury or form. But I mean, you look at the very top, you know, Weeders had injury in the preseason and was able to still perform at an elite level. Sam Walsh was an interesting one. There were times where he definitely was elite, but I didn't feel like he had an elite season. And that's maybe just based on the standards that he has set for himself. As I said earlier in the video, it's really hard to grade Doc, Jack Silvani, and Sam Durden. And then, you know, Jesse Motlop and Durds, Corey, that is. I mean, they've just started being thought of in this way. They're not super young players in their first or second seasons. Jesse's in his third, but he set the bar really high with his second season and his preseason. So that was a bit tricky, but yeah, let me know in the comments below. What did you think of the list? If you did a list, let me know what yours looks like and let's have a chat about it. Go Blues.